I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on innovation for growth and sustainability in the era of AI. Thanks for joining us. My name is Riley Stevens. I run our in-person executive programs here at the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability. Um, Thank you all for letting me know where you're joining in from. We got a few more from France as well. Canada, welcome, Carolyn. Um, Feel free to turn off your webcams, turn it on if you like. Either way works. This session is going to provide some opportunities for interaction, but you're not going to need your webcam or microphone. We'll do everything through the chat. We're going to get to our speakers, Mike Lepic and Jeff Huang, in a moment. But first, I'd like to introduce you to James Gome. He's the Senior Director for Education at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. They're our partners in our flagship program this summer. James, off to you.
All right, thank you, Riley. Yeah, for that warm welcome. Just a few words from my side from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, or WBCSD, just to say that we're delighted to be partnering with Stanford for a program this summer and to kicking off a new partnership. And so this, in the spirit of that partnership, is an opportunity to explore together some of the key areas where AI is going to revolutionize the world of sustainability. Definitely a hot topic for us and all of our members at the World Business Council. So really looking forward to diving into that today. So thank you very much to the whole Stanford team for this emerging partnership and really looking forward to a great conversation today. Back to you, Riley.
Thank you, James. Yeah, we're really looking forward to our collaboration and as it moves forward. All right, now I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for this webinar, Professor Mike Lepic. Mike is the CL Peck Class of 1906 professor in the School of Engineering and the Doerr School of Sustainability at Stanford. He is a professor of civil and environmental engineering, studying the sustainability of multi-scale built environments. He also directs both the Stanford Center for Sustainable Development and Global Competitiveness, a research center focusing on the application of AI to global sustainability challenges, and the Stanford Technology Ventures Program, the entrepreneurship center in the Stanford School of Engineering. Mike, off to you.
All right, thanks, Riley. Yeah, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff that are not hot topics today. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about innovation management. We're going to talk about sustainability. Yeah, those are things you never hear in the news or never see in the Wall Street Journal. So I want to also thank everybody for joining the webinar this morning and welcome everybody. So today I have the pleasure of welcoming Jeff Wong as our webinar guest. Jeff served as the first global chief innovation officer for EY, challenging everything from the way EY operates internally to how the firm provides services to its clients. While he was there, he invested over $100 million annually across EY around the world and owned the global labs in AI, Web3, blockchain, quantum computing, and robotics. Throughout his career, Jeff has really brought deep experience to strategy, investing, and building of new ventures globally. He sat on the Oxford Foundry Board at Oxford University and the advisory board for AI for All, a nonprofit working to increase diversity and inclusion in artificial intelligence. He was an A100 Gold House honoree, a member of several World Economic Forum Future Councils, and is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He sits on the board of the Exclusive Collective, which focuses on luxury travel and lifestyle. That's a tough one, Jeff. I know that's a tough job. And is an advisor to several startups and private equity firms. He holds an AB in economics, a master's degree in industrial engineering and engineering management, and an MBA, all from Stanford. I should also note that Jeff is currently an adjunct lecturer in both the School of Engineering and the Doerr School of Sustainability at Stanford, teaching classes on AI infrastructure, innovation, and sustainability. And just to give you a sense, here's a quote that I love from Jeff, which I think fits well with the focus on innovation and sustainability in this webinar. So to quote Jeff, and this is always kind of dangerous, quoting somebody who's like right there in front of you.
I'm watching you, Mike. I'm
Yeah,
watching.
I know. At EY, when we put together our access to data with our trusted relationships, we can transform companies and entire industries. Our ability to have an impact on the working world and our opportunity to change how we work is remarkable. I'm excited every day about the chance to forge ahead with the teams at EY. And so, Jeff, first of all, welcome. And I love that quote because it talks about impact. And I know we can think about impact in all kinds of different dimensions. And we'll hit on some of that today. But welcome. It's so great to have you here. And thank you for the time you're spending with us this morning.
Mike, thank you, and to the whole group, thank you for having me today. I look forward to a great conversation. And that was certainly an overly generous introduction, Mike. And I feel like the pressure is on though, because I'm watching it through the chat. And we have people from all over the country, Canada, Finland, South Africa, Brazil. So the pressure is on for us, Mike.
No, no pressure, just a lot more fun. So, Jeff, I want to get right into it. EY, you're best known as an accounting firm and a tax consultancy. So I think it's probably not strange that people ask, like, what does a global chief innovation officer do at an accounting firm? It's never been known as the most innovative of industries. And why does EY operating in such a traditional industry, or any company operating in such a traditional industry, why do you need a chief innovation officer?
So, Mike, the important thing to see about today, and I think everybody who's joined this call understands this, is the world is changing so quickly. And any organization, even 100+ year organizations like EY is, need to think about how the changes in the world impact how they act, operate, and really what products they deliver for the future. The interesting thing for me is that it's like it was a good quote because it relates to the quote. When you describe EY, when anyone describes it, we say accounting firm, consulting firm, tax firm, right? Those auditors, right? That's usually the first word that comes out of people's mouths. And that's true. Those are the functions and the products that we have, and or they have and they deliver. Sorry, I retired from the firm a year ago. Um, uh, but but when you take a different look at it, what you start to understand is we had EY and the Big Four have login access, in essence, login access to the ERP systems to 60-70% of the world through our tax and audit function. And so you ask yourself, in a world like today, where you can take that massive amount of data and see the patterns of what's going on through technologies like artificial intelligence, what would you do as a firm, right? What new products could you offer? What could you see about what's happening today? And what can you forecast about the future? And that opening of perspective really gave us a big opportunity to not just transform sort of how we were thinking about the services that we deliver that everyone knows and loves, but also to think about how we want to do things for the future. And I think you asked the second question is why do companies need to have innovation today? What's really interesting is when I got to EY, it was 10 years ago, I said, look, EY itself, and I imagine many of the organizations that are on this call and are represented here today, these are large, successful organizations. These are companies that have been around for a long time that have been through transitions before, right? So it's not when you do 150 years in an industry, you've made some changes, right? To be able to survive that length of time, to be a leader today. The challenge that I really see, and this is from traveling around the world talking to C-suites and boards that aren't EY, not just EY, but our client firms, is the challenge today is how fast things are changing, right? It isn't that companies can't adapt, it's that they can't adapt at the speed at
Mm.
which the world is moving today.
And that's a huge point, right? Because it's not that you can't adapt, it's that today it is so much faster.
So much faster. We used to, Mike, we as all the literature say, we used to talk about things as generational shifts. Oh, well, we go through these generational shifts. Um, this is multiple shifts in a generation,
Mhm.
right? If you just think back a dozen years ago to where AI was, AI just 12 years ago was that cool thing that Google was doing with its self-driving car, right? Like, oh, that was the biggest exhibition of that. And we had just started to be able to identify, that is a cat in a series of videos, right? The number of different AI advances just inside of that terminology, AI advances to where we are today, where we have systems that can answer the LSAT or human biology AP efforts, or at EY, we sent it all the accounting and tax tests, right? That today, it's not just identifying a cat inside of a video, right? We can do 10 out of we can pass 10 out of the 12 accounting tests. In fact, that data is from a year ago, right? So it's probably all 12, right? We can score well on these exams. We can do these advanced mathematics. It's a remarkable set of shifts that happened just in the last 12 years.
And I love how you bring up Fei Fei's example of trying to identify a cat. She's great. And it if we look like back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the amount of time that an S&P 500 company spent on the S&P 500 was like 33, 34 years. And next year it's projected sort of to go down to just a little over a decade. And so your notion of generational shifts isn't real anymore because you could literally at 33, 34 years spend an entire career as a big player. And now it is up and down quickly. So, so let's talk about AI, right? So let's dig a little deeper there. It was a big part of your innovation strategy at EY, and you were certainly ahead of the curve in that regard as far as using AI and innovation within at least like a tax consultancy and accounting and some of those other things, right? How do you think about managing innovation in today's AI landscape? The technology, as you said, is changing at a breakneck pace. And really, is there a management framework here, or is it just, I got to keep up and I'm just going to throw everything at the wall? Because
Yeah,
managing is like really, I mean, how do you think about the most important things for an innovation-focused executive to keep in mind?
yeah, Mike, I would say two things for, and we have leaders on this call today, I think, who wrestle with this problem right now. The first thing I always say is get your hands dirty, meaning play with the technology, have your leadership teams playing with the technology, have them use it in their day-to-day lives. It was interesting to watch a lot of organizations around the world at the C-suite board level where they would talk about these technologies in theory,
Mm.
right? Oh yeah, I read the article about AI, and so in theory, in my organization, it could do this or that. And the point is, until you actually try to use the tools, it just really it doesn't come to reality. And
Well,
the
and even
point
on,
is,
and even here, it's a little uncomfortable for me to say AI because AI is not an actual technology, right? You really technologists get into, is this a large language model? Is this machine learning? Is this VLM? Is this and even the use of the word and term AI doesn't really belies the specificity and really isn't the right word to use in a lot of these conversations.
absolutely, Mike. It's a portfolio of approaches, even technologies and approaches that are available to you. And so the first thing for everybody is get your hands dirty, use it, on your team, tell your team to use it, make it a part of their job, right? A part of your job is to use whatever insert name of your favorite system, transformer-based LLM system, ChatGPT, Gemini, the Claude stuff, right? Use your favorite version of it and try it, right? It's just tried it. Tried it to make it a more interesting part of your day. Try to use it to make your day more functional. Try to make it so you save an hour of time so that you personally can understand how you get your hands dirty on this. And then the second part is it's not a throw everything at the wall. And it's not a singular genius model, right? Oh, well, look, we're going to hire the 22-year-old and that person will figure it out, right? They're going to be the
Singular
next Mark
genius
Zuckerberg,
model.
but I, insert name of company, am able to hire the next Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, whatever name of famous inventor that you want. They're going to come work for me and they're going to figure this out. And the fact is that isn't even how it worked in Silicon Valley when these folks, the famous names, grew up. It was always a portfolio. It is always an approach. right? So we had $100 million a year, and believe you me, when you do $100 million a year, you're monitored. Like people are watching and measuring
Mm.
your output, what's happening, etc. You're measuring and monitoring how this happens. So when we think about a world that's moving this quickly, get your hands dirty and take a portfolio style approach. Right? There's a lot you can mimic from the venture capital world. It is not just a set of genius engineers running around creating the future. That's the end story that you see. That's the movie that you get. Underneath what you have is a very systematic process of investment, culling, double down on the winners or on the winning teams, the things that are working. Okay, let's do that again. That's the process at a high level, that's the process of how all this innovation will work systematically for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank Lisbeth for putting a question in. I want to encourage everybody else to answer, to put some questions in. You know, you're at EY, you do have very sensitive client data. How do you make sure that you're testing these things without like breaking that level of trust? Because obviously the accounting and tax part of the firm is sacrosanct. I mean, you have to keep that very almost walled off, I would imagine, so that you can do some of these experimentations.
Yeah, so you're right. When I was at EY, there's not just the internal regulation, internal policies. There's the specific contracts that you have with the client customers. And then in the US, there's the SEC, but since we're international, it's all the regulatory bodies in the world that have requirements about how you treat and handle the data. There's sort of two interesting observations with that because it is true that we were rightfully far more conservative, far more strict about how we followed policy, regulation, and law than perhaps what you see in the startups.
Mm,
One observation is you don't need all the data, right? So you need sampling of the data, right? And when you have 300,000 clients around the world, like a sampling of the data is good enough, right? We don't need 300,000 yeses in order to make progress. We, in different fields and pools, needed a massively small subset of the clients in order to really understand the world better.
mm.
Here's the second thing. It was really fascinating. So they were very nervous because we basically had to put a new terminology into our contracts, right? A new terminology that allow us to use this data in an anonymized way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like everything, if there are any lawyers on the call, everything you would want to put in, right? So we put in this new terminology and we had to rewrite the new contracts that were coming out. So we had to put this as a new default policy. And oh boy, they spent a lot of, well, it was partially my team. We spent, and the firm wide spent a lot of time in legal hours, like what are the exact terms and words. Most of the clients didn't care, they just signed it. Right. And so it is, I think there's an understanding in the world today that data needs to be used to create these tools to make it a better answer for them.
Yeah,
So
create
they
more
were
value for you
there's value
as
for
a
them.
client.
So we were swimming in massive pools of data, even though we did not have 100%, and it was only a subset, but it was far more data than anyone needed to be able to understand the world far better than we did before we used these systems.
Mhm, mhm. I want to thank everybody for sending some questions in, and I'll get to some of these. Uh, so this moves at super fast speed. Innovation fatigue,
Yeah.
like it's a thing.
Yeah.
How do you avoid innovation fatigue? Maybe on your team, but more broadly within the leadership team. Like, oh man, this innovation guy again. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Mike, you know, I'll joke. So, when I joined, EY, so this is more than 10 years, about 10 years ago, I guess, more than 10 years. My budget in the first year was $3 million. My global budget, $3 million, massive tens of billions of dollar revenue firm. We're gonna do innovation. Here's our innovation leader, $3 million. When I
Let me
left,
just put that, you're a rounding error on the
I was
rest of everybody's budget.
I was the cute bunny in the corner, right? That everybody loved. To your point, everybody loves when you're the cute bunny in the corner, right? Like you come and pet you, you come play, they take you out to show all the kids, right? Everything's great. Um, when sort of not even by the end of my tenure, by sort of middle of my tenure there, so year six, seven, eight, we were $100 million a year of the global budget and an additional 250 to $300 at the regional level. So we were actually doing $350 million a year investment. To your point, it wasn't fatigue, but you aren't the cute bunny in the corner anymore,
Mm,
right?
mm,
You are somebody who's consuming resources in a way that impacts other people's resource allocation,
yeah.
right? So you're taking budget that other people want. So it's not just fatigue, it was, hey, wait, I want this for my people. I want to expand my team. I want to. So, um, the way that I think everything has to end up, right, is you end up needing to deliver value to the company in an accelerated fashion for the dollars that they give you, right? So my comment to my team from day one was, wasn't a big team on day one, by the way, it was just me, but it was it it
Look,
had to.
you said this to the mirror, right?
Yes, exactly. This is to the mirror. For what we were doing, for such a long standing organization, right? In the end, it had to end up with revenues and profits, right?
Mm,
The innovation, it may not work, right? It's okay if it doesn't work. It's okay if the revenue and profit isn't this year, right? Or even next year. But in the end, if we are not focused on revenues and profits, we can't expand our budget. We can't prove our worth inside of the organization. So the reason why it went from 3 to $100 million wasn't because we were this cute bunny and everyone threw money at us, like more carrots for us. Um, it was because we were generating returns.
yeah.
So my last year there, we did $6.50 of revenue for every dollar we invested. So the products that we supported, invested in, et cetera, in the previous year did $6.50 the next year. That was not our best year.
Yeah. And
Our best year was like 10.
I want you to say that a third time, right? Because that's what gets the attention of CFOs and CEOs. I put a dollar in this year and look, tracking the return on internal investments is not easy. It takes a lot of work. But EY is probably good at tracking internal accounting. And so, the notion that you could verifiably say, dollar in this year, six and a half more in revenue next year. That's a big deal.
No, that's how I got more budget, more influence, more capacity to experiment. And inside of that portfolio, right? This isn't a single thing. I described the portfolio before. Inside of that portfolio, our best year was 10 to 1,
Mm,
right? By the way, in that 6.5 to 1, I'm not accounting for the earnings increases,
mm.
right? Because we additionally had earnings increases, but to your point, they're really hard to account for, right?
And
I
actually,
saved you
this is a
time.
couple of questions coming in right now
Yeah.
exactly about this. Like, how are you measuring that? And I'm sure it was not a very simple process. And then, how long did it take to get to one to six and a half?
Yes. So, um, okay. Sorry, two parts to that.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
One
Yeah.
is how do we measure? Revenue far easier to measure than earnings for
Mm,
us as an organization. Different organizations are
mm,
different. For us, because we could look at the product and we could have the partners tell us, yeah, we wouldn't sell X or Y or Z without this. This is what we sold. This is what so it would be zero or you, right? And the senior partners on the ground accounted for the credit we would get. So they
mm,
could decide to credit us or not credit us, but they did it, and it was through a system, the revenue measurement system. So they couldn't just like make up a number.
mm, mhm,
That's the revenue side. The time saving side is really hard because earnings at a people services company only comes if you then reassign those people. And was it clear
mm,
that people being reassigned? It was very clear that they were saving time.
mm.
So there we measured the millions, tens of millions of hours saved.
Yeah.
And you can account to that to a dollar, but I never did because I said, look, we'll just tell you the number of hours saved. And if you don't want to believe it, you don't have to. I'm making enough money on revenue, it's fine. So that was the first part of the question is
Yeah, how
we
many
had a
years?
team measuring this.
Yeah, how many years did it take you to get to that kind of 1 to 6.5? I'm sure it
So
wasn't year
this is the
one.
amazing thing because I think if I saw the where people are coming from, there's a lot of big successful companies, right? So in the venture capital world, right, to do this would have been let's say pre-LLM phase because there's some crazy math that's going on right now.
Mhm.
Um, you have 1 in 10 that's successful. And you talk about valuations, not about revenue, right? Like you're just like, oh, look, the value of this thing went up because, other people bid on it.
Yeah.
Um, if you leverage, think about each of your companies. If you take the assets of your company and just take the assets and say, what do I want and what parts of this can I leave behind? And let me sort of recast it and spin it in a way that I can deliver a new product to your customers, right? How much money could you make? And so we were probably year three when we hit numbers like I think year three we hit $10 of revenue.
Mhm.
Obviously the budget was much smaller than
Sure.
but what you realize, I'll freely tell you, Mike, I cheated, right? We cheated. Like we had all this login data, like all the data that we needed. And by the way, we had this, 14,000 person set of partners, depending on which region you're in, um, who act like a sales force. So when we had to figure out if something was going to work or not, we could talk to the end customer. And we did constantly,
Yeah.
right? So our ability to cheat that versus the venture capitalists out in the world
Mm.
was phenomenal. So we did it. Of course, you take advantage of it, and
Yeah.
that's what I would say is the magic of innovation at enterprises. Right? You look at it, and everyone says, "Oh, look, the venture folks, they're professionals. They spend all their time. They don't have access to your customers the way you do. They don't have access to the expertise the way you do. They don't have access to the data the way you do. So if you take advantage of it, you can create these the risk reward on it is exceptional,
Yeah.
and that was the open secret that we had is like we had extraordinary and exceptional returns compared to everybody in the world because we took advantage of what we had.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I see all the questions coming in. I'm going to get to a lot of these. So ask everybody to just be patient on that. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk more broadly about innovation leadership. Not necessarily just the AI piece. Obviously, that's a big piece of where innovation is today, but more broadly about the innovation leadership and get your thoughts about trying to align senior leaders around innovation strategy. I mean, EY is a partnership, right? So it's really hard to, I guess we'll say, change senior leaders. And it, first of all, is it important that senior leadership aligns, or is it just enough to have the CEO behind you, and therefore the rabbit in the corner is protected and safe? Or, do you have to have it? And if so, what works to get people aligned? And I imagine some of it is a 1 to 6.5 revenue to dollar in ratio.
That helps.
That helps
Yeah.
a lot. But like, how do you think about this? And do you need them to align?
Let's start with the sponsorship. You absolutely need sponsorship. And for me, when I look through organizations, it's the CEO, maybe the number two, right? Like it tends to be that. When I would talk to the clients, it's usually CEO. I'd say it's the CEO either or the chairperson, right? Like people who are responsible not just for the quarter, but for the longevity of the company,
Hmm.
like who are directly responsible. And what I noticed is when you drop down in the organization, and it's not a far drop, when you drop down to, oh, it's their budget holders and all these things, there's a recognition that internally you're basically measured by how do you deliver the next quarter or at best the year, right? And so the instant that that becomes the overarching cry on an executive, no matter where their heart or mind is, in the end, the trade-off is pretty quick,
Hmm.
right? Back to quarterly earnings and things like that. The
Hmm.
CEOs are judged by the longevity, or are often judged by the longevity of the guy. Are we in a better position? Do we have a better view? Does the shareholders have a better long view and say, oh, there's value that's being created here? So the sponsorship has to come to me from the CEO. One of the biggest compliments I received at my retirement. Not really retired, as Mike knows, but I'm gonna air quote retirement from my retirement from EY.
Do we ever
Um,
really retire?
yeah,
Like, come on.
with the CEO and the incoming CEO were said, yeah, all the money, all the dollars, that's great, right? But they're the CEO. He said the difference is the culture,
Mm,
right? The difference was how we talked about technology, how we had
mm,
confidence in implementing these new technologies, how we kept thinking about what's coming next and invested in what's coming as a system, not my organization, as a systematically throughout the organization, because culturally our mind was in a different place. And I'll reach back to I worked for at eBay for a number of years in the internet when eBay was doing really well, and the president at the time said, "What's culture? It's the stories we tell and the heroes we hold high." And
mm.
what was really
Hold on.
interesting,
Can you say that again? Just because I think it's a great quote. What is
oh,
culture?
what is culture? It's the stories that we tell and the heroes we hold high.
It's always that CEO that saved us during the worst time. It's
Yeah,
always that country, director that absolutely
yeah.
turned it around. It's all those things.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's what you do, and the thing I have to give credit to the I worked under two CEOs at EY was um they they absolutely made sure we told these stories at the highest level and constantly,
Mm,
right? So and everybody probably has this at the big global executive meeting, at the leadership meeting, we had a top 100 partner meeting. There are three a year, and for the first 7 years, I was a speaker in every single one of them. Like I had a slot, and a lot of times I had like a half day slot, right? And it will seem like a detail, right? Like three times a year, you had a couple hours on a stage and you did a song and dance. Like, why is that important? What's important was the cascade from there, right? We had it's the top 100 partners, the people who ran everything at the firm, all the, $50 billion or whatever we do. And then because the CEO is declaring this as important enough that in a 2 day session, we're doing a half day on way the world's changing and all the cool things we're doing and all the cool technology we have, that allowed the story to cascade. So
mm,
for the board members and C-suite folks, like being consistent with that over time, talking about over time, you have an important part to play in how that culture changes because everyone's looking at you. And if you set the agenda, how you set the agenda
mm.
is exactly what people are going to think is important, what they're going to value, what they're going to realize is how they get promoted, how they make money, how they get resources. So that's exactly, I have to give a lot of credit to him and the work of my team to keep spreading
Well,
these stories.
and highlighting that every single time the top partners got together helps with that alignment. Maybe you aren't aligned initially, but after you hear it again and again and again, and you see that this is going to be a big deal, it does start to form that culture over time.
And then I'll say a last sort of tidbit on this, which is something that was very clear to me. And I said it was meant to be funny, but it's true. When I woke up in the morning, when I was at EY, when I woke up in the morning, half the company loved me, half the company hated me. And I didn't know which half was which. Right? Like it's just, and you have to, if so for the innovation folks, the people who are trying to drive change inside their organizations, you have to be comfortable with the idea that not everybody's going to like the change that you're delivering.
Mm.
Everybody wants you to change their neighbor, the other organization. Look over there. They're silly. They need to be doing this differently. Don't they know? Right? Don't they know the world's changed? And I said, "Oh yeah, their world needs to change, but so does yours." And they're like, "No, not me. Not me. I'm smart. I've been paying attention." And the fact is everybody needs to change. And you, for the innovation folks on the call, just have to be comfortable with you're not everyone's going to like you. You're not going to get 100% alignment. You get enough alignment to move forward. You have, in my case, the protection from the very, very top of the organization,
Sure.
which I find critical because I, I, I,
You're
I
only
had a
the you're only the
9 year
cute
run,
you're only
right?
the cute bunny for so long, and at
Yeah.
some point you need to have a guard dog.
Exactly, exactly. And I had a 9-year run for a role that usually lasts 18 months. That's actually what my wife told me when I took it. She's like, you can take that job. It's fine because you'll be there for a maximum 2 years. Right? And that was her comment to me. And it's true. It's true because if you don't have the deep souled sponsorship for me from the very, very top of the organization,
Mhm. Mm.
it is very difficult to make change.
Well, and so I want to shift gears once again to kind of talk about this intersection between innovation and sustainability. And I think there's a lot of overlap
Mm.
between some of the things you just
Yeah.
said and sustainability. Oh, I'm doing just fine. Please look at other places. You know, half the company likes what you're doing, half of the company thinks that what you're doing is a waste of time in some regards. And so I see a lot of parallels in some regards. And when it comes to this, like I'm of the opinion that innovation, specifically innovation like by large companies, is going to be key to addressing climate change. Without large companies coming, online to help address this, we are never going to get there. And do you think there are ways to think about sustainability concepts within your innovation portfolio, while of course also pursuing revenue growth? I mean, you can't forget about that. And this is kind of one of those things where you've got different objectives with the same investment portfolio. Is it possible?
Yes, Mike. It's really interesting. We had a large sustainability effort bloom while I was there, rightfully bloom while I was there. And the parallels are noted, right? Everybody loves the terminology of innovation. Everybody loves the terminology of sustainability. Everybody knows it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I don't think nobody's ever said we don't want to be innovative and we hate being sustainable.
Yeah,
It's certainly
exactly.
not the press release that you tend to see.
Exactly. Everybody loves it, but how do you make it tangible, right? So how do you take it from this idea that it's neat and we should be doing it to what are the projects that we're doing to make it happen? So that was a strong parallel. Similarly, what is a portfolio of investments that you're going to make into sustainability, and how do you measure the impact on the organization? Not just from we got better marketing, which I'm not
We
saying
did.
people do, but
Right,
how do
but
you
we did.
measure it? So, yeah, you better marketing is one aspect of it. Innovation too, like better market. Oh, we can
Mhm.
talk about how cool we are because we're
Yeah.
neat. But how do you make it tangible metrics that relate to the value of the company? Right? I said, innovation has to relate to revenues and earnings. How do we relate sustainability to revenues, earnings? Innovation relates to long-term strategic uh, advantages or
Mhm.
blocks or
Yep.
things like that. There's stuff we did that we didn't fully roll out. We just had the threat of being able to in case anyone else did, right? How
Mm.
do you think about sort of the strategic value of sustainability like we thought about the strategic value of innovation? Right? How do we think about it as a capability? The fact is it isn't just about AI, Mike, right? Like all those lab names, who knew which one would, I mean, we kind of knew, we had kind of a guess of what would happen, but you never know. Somebody delivers the physics, genius of a quantum computer, and this stuff changes tomorrow. So we
Mm.
had to be ready for that shift and change. How do you think about sustainability and the investments organizations make to make sure you're ready for shifts and changes? Because
Mm.
within sustainability, those investments could mean that your competitors suddenly have a different cost basis.
Yeah.
Suddenly a regulation change and they can adapt and you can't, right? So these things have value. How do you relate your efforts to value? And I argue in a portfolio concept. And then how do you make it a long-standing? Because it's not sustainability isn't about like let's figure out how to make our product better today. It's a lifetime of the company effort. So
Yeah.
all these things are very parallel.
And along those same lines, you talked about having people in your corner, so to speak, that are able to take a longer viewpoint. And sustainability is not a quarterly sort of driven thing, right? Much like innovation. It's not like, oh, we're going to do this quarter as our focus. This is going to be our big push right now, and then we're going to be done. Like, no, it doesn't work
No,
that way.
no. And that's why for sustainability as well was a CEO sponsored
Mhm.
um, activity, right? It's effort, investment, etc. and
Yeah.
they started to take up resources, right, inside the organization in a positive way,
Sure. Yeah.
in a positive way.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that sponsorship is incredibly important. And for the CEOs, board members on the call, that sponsorship for you to give, if you're not doing it yourself, right? For you to give is central to the ability of your teams to execute and operate. It can't just be better marketing. Sustainability can't just be better marketing, right? If it's just better marketing, it'll die within your organization. And if that was your decision, that was your decision. But I think for most people on this call, it's about changing culture, changing the nature of what your company can do. Because that's really what's important in a world that's changing so quickly. How can you add in things that your company can do at this point in time?
It's a great point that from a CEO or very senior leader perspective, that is part of your job
Yeah.
to protect or to foster, to
Yeah.
bring along some of those ideas as difficult as it might be. I want to go back to a question that Scott had asked in the chat. And some of the opportunities in the sustainability space for things like small language models, right? To be in there. And then also, you talk about portfolio. How do you think about optimizing that portfolio, whether it's an innovation portfolio or a sustainability portfolio? We can talk about numerous investments, but whenever there's a portfolio, you prioritize, you rebalance. You talked about culling, right? So yeah, first question, small language models, things like this. And then the second question, portfolio management. What is the portfolio theory on these types of things?
Yeah, if the question is about the sustainability and AI question, right? The energy, yeah, no, what's interesting is there's a whole series of approaches that are being brought to bear that are an effort to bring the energy costs down. I would argue it is a sustainable answer. So small language models, things you can run on your laptop, you don't need the massive servers to do um, new chips that are coming out, better cooling technology that are coming out. Um, and you can see that these are all positive from a sustainability aspect, but you can also see how they related these efforts in sustainability to revenues and profits, right? My power costs come down, my cooling costs come down, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how you make it a great set of investments fit inside of the financial objectives or the long-term shareholder objectives of a company.
Hmm.
So that is great to see. Second question around, and so yes, people are making lots and lots of efforts around this, and so there's a whole series of things that aren't just about small models, but chip design, cooling design, data center design, et cetera, et cetera. Which is good to see because we're gonna need more power than I'll put out my forecast. It is more power than any projection I've seen because I'm looking at the products on the ground and what they take, and I'm looking at these highfalutin infrastructure projections. And like these numbers do not match, right? The
Yeah.
demand on what we will want to do with these products is does not match the amount of power even coming online. So that set that aside. The portfolio question.
Mhm.
So this is where taking sort of the spirit of the venture capital concept comes into play in a very strong way. Um, it isn't just about being cool with the technologies and having fun things, right? It's an investment portfolio, just like you manage for yourself, right? All the people on the call, you manage for yourself. The things that make money or are successful, you put more into it. The things that aren't, you sell, right? Or you get rid of, you sell out of your portfolio. It's the same exact theory. So if you boil it down, it's actually relatively simple, right? You make a series of investments, the ones that are great or that you're are being making to the next level, you keep. The ones that aren't, you cull from the herd, right? You take them out. Um, Important thing though to recognize is people often ask us like, oh, failure, you have to have a failure rate. And I take a very different mindset around it, which is um, sort of it's all in the growth mindset concept. if you learn something about something not working, like why it didn't work, that is very valuable because it prevents you from heading down a pathway that you could be expending more and more money. So
Hmm.
what did you learn from that specific, thing that did not work the way you expected that says, "Oh yeah, okay, this business model doesn't work. This technology isn't where we thought it was." And so it prevents me from saying, "Oh, okay, there's like six related things that I could have done, but I'm not doing those." And that's
Yeah.
that learning and knowledge that you get from it. So if
Yeah.
you have a growth mindset with your portfolio, um, everything is valuable. Things that
You know,
don't work the way you expect are valuable.
so along those lines, and something I think maybe I heard you say at one point, the default setting in large corporations is that once you start a project, it's going to keep going. The default setting is on. And within venture capital, the default setting, if something's not working, is no more funding, it dies, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about culling, right? You have to be willing to cull the projects that are not working. You can learn from them. And so there was a question that came in with Teresa, and she said, look, there are some studies that 95% of AI implementations fail. Gartner said 85%. I mean, it's always these high numbers. How much of that do you think is they actually did fail? And how much of that maybe is this isn't working? We're just going to kill it because it is not delivering value. And I'm not, maybe that's a failure, maybe it's not, kind of depends on how you think of it. But where were you guys at EY when it came to failure rates? And like you said, you tried to just learn from them.
Yeah, we just try to learn from them. So it was never a failure. So it's a Teresa's been reading and experiencing some things because that is a very, very, very knowledgeable set of numbers research that has been out there. Most of the AI implementations that I've seen fail are because I see a mismatch between what AI can do and how you have to garner adoption, how do you have to test that program, um, versus how traditional software has been purchased, built, implemented, and rolled out. And that difference is most shown by, you're correct, there's a lot of AI implementations that appear to be failing. Most often, those implementations are from, uh, hopefully, there are not too many CTOs buying these tools, then neutering the tools around all these correctly done processes in the past, right?
Mm,
Security protocols, the privacy protocols, etc. If we can't confirm this or that, let's narrow what this thing can do because I'm
mm,
going to cut off this power so much so that I can only do this one thing. So it's interesting because enterprise adoption of AI for the purchases from the enterprise, right? The CTO buys it and blesses it, are quite high. So whether it's 80%, 70%, it depends on what you're reading or what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. The adoption rate of tools used, consumer tools used to improve people's jobs or do your homework if you have kids in school, extraordinarily high. It's like 90%. So what's really happening is the enterprise version of things. Sorry, my hypothesis or my observation is the enterprise version of these implementations are being put in a way that neuters the value of the technology. I need
mm.
100% accuracy. These systems aren't 100% accurate. You can depend on the human to make a judgment call, right? Like, oh, I didn't quite mean that. Let me change it. Like, let
Yeah.
me actively change it. So you have this mismatch. So what it is you have low success rate of enterprise implementation of enterprise purchased AI because the people are using the tools themselves and they are extraordinarily successful. And anything isn't better than that, they're going to keep using their ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude version of it and not tell you. And that's
Yeah.
the math of what the studies that I'm looking at is like, yeah, they're just using ChatGPT or Gemini, right? It's like, okay, so they are using AI, they are improving their job. You
Mm.
just bought the wrong tool
Yeah.
or you neutered it.
I kind of go back to a conversation I had at one point with the head of product for Instagram before they came out with some of the shopping features on Instagram. That was not their intention with Instagram, right? Their intention with Instagram was to make money a different way. And they found that a ton of their users were using it to do this. They would identify something and say, hey, I see this in this picture. What is it? Does anybody know where I can buy it? And then people would respond in the thread and they said, well, wait a minute. Folks are using our platform or using a tool in a way that we never envisioned. And you just have to be ready to either say, look, we're going to cut that off because it's not what we want to do, or we're going to say, look, that's actually a great use case. We didn't see that happening. We are now going to say this gets rolled out to the rest of the company. And it ended up becoming one of obviously Instagram's biggest products, Instagram Mall and everything else around revenue generation. And so, your point of kind of separating, here's what we bought enterprise level and no one seems to like it versus our employees are actually using this very, very successfully.
I have two
Yeah.
kids in college, and if you think that they aren't going to use AI when they enter the workforce
Yeah.
at a very high level, and for all those folks who have kids or who hire 22-year-olds as they come out of
Mhm.
school, right? Like they are well beyond the systems and processes and the methodology of how you think the world should run or your organization has set up the world to run. They're just running it a different way. And so the tools you're using to support the old way of doing things, they don't find particularly useful because they can use it in a new way. um, how to write concepts, how to do research, how to model. I mean, frankly, some of the modeling things are fantastic, right? Um, not exactly always accurate, but they figure it out because they know how to get an A, right? They figure out what that gap is. They figure out how to check it, et cetera, et cetera. But boy, it is half the time, a third of the time, 20% of the time. Your employees, in fact, for all the leaders on the org, you want them to be doing this. Now, the scary
Mhm.
part is privacy, data, things like that. Um, so find a
Yeah.
way to encompass the best parts of everything without neutering the products, and I think you'll see a different
Yeah.
outcome.
No, that's a great point. All right, I am keeping my eye on the clock, and I want to thank everyone for all the questions coming in. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them, and hopefully, what I hope you're seeing from this webinar is how, like both Jeff and I and all the folks sort of in this ecosystem here like to pull back the curtain a little bit and give you a sense of how these things are really working and how you can start to approach this nexus between technology, innovation, sustainability. How do you manage these things, which are in some ways very dissimilar, but in some regards not that different. And so yeah, I want to thank everyone for their questions and specifically now I want to yes thank Jeff directly. Jeff, thank you so much for your time this morning. This was
Thank you for having me. It was
so
such
much
a it's
fun.
such a joy to be in front of this audience.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to turn it back to Riley now, and he's going to talk about a program that we have coming up this summer where you can get more of this kind of experience coming onto campus and seeing some of these types of discussions and engaging more deeply with thought leaders and researchers and practitioners in this space. Riley.
Thanks so much, Mike, and huge thanks again to both of you, Jeff and Mike, for the discussion today. That was super insightful and hopefully really, really relevant to everyone in the room. Let's dive into our flagship program that Mike was just talking about. So the Stanford Leadership Experience, Science, Innovation, and Resilience. We're hosting in collaboration with WBCSD. This is a 5-day program on campus designed for senior leaders, executives, and board directors who want to be at the forefront of responsible business and innovation. Across the week, participants will engage with Stanford faculty from across the university, including from our School of Medicine, our law school, and the GSB, our business school, School of Engineering. Of course, we'll talk about AI as well as today. Industry experts and peers on topics like systems thinking, organizational resilience, emerging technologies, and the evolving demands of sustainable strategy. Now, my favorite part, as you can see on the diagram here, is there's also some excursions in this program. The excursions will get you out of the classroom to explore some of Northern California's unique sustainability challenges and solutions. With these excursions, this program is giving participants the opportunity to learn from our globally recognized faculty from both Stanford and WBCSD, experience firsthand the business opportunities of sustainability, and expose themselves to the incredible innovation that is taking place here at Stanford in our amazingly innovative neighborhood ecosystem of Silicon Valley. Some of the things Jeff was talking about today, for example. So this program is a great fit if you're looking for a transformational, immersive experience that strengthens both your leadership capabilities and your understanding of the forces shaping nature and the future. Mike Lepic, as you saw today, will be serving as our academic director for this program. So today was just a little preview in terms of what you might get in the future. Mike, along with the rest of our pioneering faculty here at Stanford and WCSD, as long as our industry representatives, will lead participants as they expand their perspective on sustainability and its role in shaping resilient, future-ready organizations. So I know we don't have a ton of time today, but we hope that you'll join us this summer. It promises to be a very transformational experience. Please scan the code that you see on the screen here. If you'd like to learn more, you can scan it to register. Or let me change the slide here, or feel free to just email me directly if you have any questions. If you'd like to set up a time to meet and connect and talk through kind of what this program really means to you and your organization, I'm happy to chat with you and I'd love to talk to you.